If you woke up on January 3rd and thought that you had missed a major war, same. Caracas lit up with explosions, helicopters were filmed flying low over the city, and the White House announced that U.S. forces had captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. This was dubbed Operation Absolute Resolve, and we already have more official details than you usually get for something like this. Here's what we can say without guessing what's strongly suggested by reporting and imagery, and what's still unknown. Then we'll talk about the uncomfortable question, what the US does now that it just grabbed a sitting head of state out of his own capital. So here it all is, down and dirty, and I apologize for that, but I'm the one writing and editing this video this time, so go easy on me. For months, the U.S. has been building pressure in the Caribbean with repeated strikes on suspected drug smuggling vessels, a maritime crackdown, seizing oil tankers, and a growing military posture in the region. By late December, you had serious pieces in place with the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, the USS Iwo Jima's Amphibious Readiness Group, and the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, and a steady flow of aircraft into the area. Puerto Rico showed up repeatedly in reporting and imagery as a hub for the buildup, including stealth fighters and other support aircraft. Task and Purpose also reported that the U.S. had roughly 15,000 personnel staged around the region. Reporting also gave us some clues on who was providing that air power. The Ford's Carrier Air Wing 8 has multiple Super Hornet squadrons, plus EA-18G Growlers and E-2 Hawkeyes, and then on the land side you have F-35As from the Vermont Air National Guard, you had F-22s, MQ-9 Reapers, B-1 bombers, B-52s were spotted flying overhead, and a lot of other air power was concentrated into this one small region. That all matters because the raid to capture Maduro wasn't just done by a handful of operators riding helicopters into Caracas. It took incredible levels of precision with thousands of personnel involved and over 150 aircraft taking part. So now let's get into the official timeline of how things played out. Here's the sequence as it was laid out by Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane. Late on January 2nd, Trump gave the final approval shortly before 2300 Eastern. Kane said the package involved roughly 150 aircraft launching from 20 bases and ships. The air component, as it was publicly listed, included F-22s, F-35s, F-18s, B-1 bombers, EA-18 electronic attack aircraft, and E-2 command and control aircraft, and remotely piloted drones. The raid force on the ground was led by Delta Force and included DEA agents since this was technically an arrest. They were inserted by helicopters flown by the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, also known as the Night Stalkers. Kane said the helicopters flew low over the Caribbean until landfall, then moved to Caracas while the air package provided cover and struck key sites. Trump said the city was largely blacked out ahead of the raid due to a certain expertise, and Kane said U.S. Cyber Command and Space Command supported the operation. The cyber component is interesting, though it's not unprecedented. The U.S. has been using cyber tools in kinetic operations since at least the Kosovo bombing campaign. Even during Midnight Hammer, where U.S. B-2s bombed Iranian nuclear facilities in June of 2025, Cyber Command was employed to degrade Iranian air defenses. Selectively knocking out power in the capital is somewhat remarkable, though that also isn't unprecedented. During the raid, U.S. forces did take fire. General Kane said the helicopters responded with overwhelming force, and one helicopter was damaged but stayed operational. Trump later said a helicopter was hit pretty hard, while also claiming no U.S. personnel were killed, with a few wounded by shrapnel and bullets. Kane's timeline said the force was back over the water by 0329 Eastern, with Maduro and Flores taken to the USS Iwo Jima. Trump has publicly confirmed that first stop with an image posted to Truth Social. The war zone also noted the presence of the Special Operations Support Ship MV Ocean Trader operating with the Iwo Jima group, which fits the idea of a sea-based special ops mothership for sustained helicopter ops. President Trump described Maduro being in a fortress-like house with steel doors and a secure room that he did not reach in time. Some reporting and imagery analysis suggest that he may have been at or near Fort Tiuna, which would track with the heavy strikes there. Other accounts point toward downtown Caracas and areas closer to the palace. Regardless, this was fast in, fast out with the target secured. But the reason it worked so well is because of what happened above the city. This is, in many respects, a testament to the suppression of enemy air defenses or SEAD. Without SEAD, it's likely that the helicopters would not have reached the target or at least sustained some heavy casualties on the way in. So this is what we know is used, and then we'll kind of give how they were likely used. First is the F-22s, which would likely have been used to provide top cover against enemy aircraft. As we noted in previous videos, Venezuela has older F-16s and about 24 Russian Su-30 Mk2s. Those are capable aircraft, but they still really are no challenge for F-22s. Then F-35s, which seem to thrive in SEAD missions, as we've seen over Iran with both the US and Israel dominating Iranian air defenses on multiple occasions. Backing them up were F-18 Super Hornets. These are your flexible fighters for escort, precision strikes, and the ability to respond immediately if air defenses light up or loyalist forces start moving. Then you have EA-18G Growlers, which are there to degrade radars and radios with electronic warfare tools. If you want helicopters to slip into a city without being tracked and queued up for a shot, this is exactly what you would need. Keeping everybody on the same page were E-2D Advanced Hawkeyes. They're the airborne quarterback coordinating the fight and keeping the air package together. And then you have the B-1, which is about range and payload. It can loiter with a lot of weapons and provide fast reaction if the ground situation changes. Then we have drones to fill in the gaps with persistent eyes and, depending on the platform, strike options. The Warzone added one of the more interesting details, reporting that at least one and possibly two RQ-170 Sentinel drones appear to have supported the mission, with sightings tied to Puerto Rico afterward. The RQ-170 is built for persistent surveillance of high-value targets in places where you'd rather not be seen. Also worth noting is that Task and Purpose pointed out some conspicuous absences from the public list. Kane did not mention AC-130 gunships or Marine Harriers, which have been involved in several operations in the Caribbean around the Venezuela efforts. That doesn't mean that they weren't available, it means that the publicly described package leaned heavily on high-end fighters, bombers, and electronic warfare. So now let's get into what they actually hit. Task and Purpose reporting says strikes at multiple sites in and around Caracas, including the La Guaira port area, the Fort Tiuna military headquarters complex, and multiple airports. Venezuelan officials also claim that sites outside the capital were struck. Fort Tiuna is a big one. It's a major command and control node for Venezuela's armed forces. The Warzone published satellite imagery showing significant damage inside the complex and noted its unique hardened features, including construction tied into nearby terrain. Now, if you remember our video on the Venezuelan military, you'll remember that most of the air defense assets they have are Russian. There has been imagery of at least one destroyed Buck M2 system, but it isn't clear what the status is of the S-300 VM systems that they also have. One would imagine that those systems would be around Caracas, but they seem to have been neutered in some way or destroyed and just no imagery yet. There were also reports of strikes at airfields, some with secondary explosions, and an apparent strike in the port area. In circulating videos, helicopters appear to be firing in the city as well. So that is what we know. Now for what we do not know, and most importantly, what comes next. We still don't have public confirmation on the exact capture site, the full target list, or what munitions were used in the strikes. Casualty numbers are also contested, with early Venezuelan reports claiming dozens killed, including civilians. Cuba has said that 32 of its officers were killed in the strikes, though it isn't really clear what they were specifically doing there. Alright, so what now? Maduro and his wife were taken to USS Iwo Jima and have since appeared in New York, where Attorney General Pamela Bondi announced indictments in the Southern District of New York for 4 counts. Those are narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns and destructive devices, and conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices. President Trump has said the US is going to run Venezuela for a period of time while his team designates who will oversee a transition. He also said the US is prepared to launch a second attack, and he didn't rule out putting US troops on the ground later. At the same time, Secretary of State Marco Rubio reportedly told Senator Mike Lee he does not expect further action now that Maduro is in custody. The Pentagon has also said that there are no US troops on the ground in Venezuela right now as I record this at 11:30 Eastern Time on Monday, January 5th. But there's still a big question on what run means without occupying the country. Right now, Maduro's vice president, Delcy Rodríguez, is in charge with President Trump's blessing, though he has said if she doesn't do what's right, she is going to pay a very big price, probably bigger than Maduro. So far, there hasn't been much said about Venezuelan opposition leader María Corina Machado or Edmundo González, who's reported to have won the 2024 Venezuelan presidential election, but then sought refuge in Spain after Maduro held on to power. Following Maduro's capture, though, he has stated his desire to be the president. If things don't work out with Rodríguez, nobody is really sure what that will mean. It could require placing U.S. troops in the country of 31 million people, though. If the U.S. moves forces in later, even limited, now you're talking about a much bigger commitment, and with it comes the risk of urban fighting, insurgency, and all the problems that we are all too familiar with from Iraq. There's also a third possibility, and this might be the worst one, and that is if Venezuela fractures. If parts of the security apparatus stay loyal and then others flip and the country enters a violent power struggle, things could get really messy and more echo things that we saw in following the fall of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. In this scenario, capturing Maduro is the easy part, and if it kind of breaks down into infighting, this could plunge an already rocky region into further destabilization. Right now, it really is too early to tell how this will shake out in the coming weeks, months, and years, but all that said, this was an incredible operation that demonstrated the unmatched capabilities of the United States military. And no, we're not going to get into the legalities of all this or start giving our personal opinion about it or getting into the political mess that this has created. We're just presenting information to you as it's known to us on January 5th at 11:34 right now in the morning. So take it for what it is. We're not trying to influence how you think about this. We just wanted to get this information out because it's important as soon as possible. So thank you for the patience around this. I apologize for the lack of polish. I'm not a video editor. I'm barely a video presenter, as you've all endured through the many months I've been doing this. So thank you for the patience and the understanding. We're just trying to get information out soon. We're really limited on editing. I don't have an in-house editor. We use a post-production house, Savvy, and they do incredible work, but they can't turn something around this fast, at least not without putting a lot of other stuff on pause. So thank you so much. We will update this story, so check out taskandpurpose.com, where a lot of this video came from. A lot of the reporting was sourced from there. So check out taskandpurpose.com and stay tuned for more shorts, community posts, things like that. Again, I'm Kyle, your friendly ginger producer man. You are all dismissed. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.